Hello, everyone out there. Welcome back to Streaming Media Connect 2024, the last panel, I believe, of the conference. This has been a great week, and we've had great panels, great moderators, great topics, great content all week. Thank you so much, Steve Kelly, for putting together a great lineup and running it so smoothly all week. There's been great attendance and everything's great. So before we get into our panel, which is called Successful Strategies for Growing and Monetizing Your Streaming Service. I need to do a little busy work here. With whoever can name the band and the music that was just playing as we were walking up onto stage and is here at the end of the panel will win an Amazon gift card of $50, courtesy of Streaming Media Connect and Steve Kelly. You'll see in the chat a bunch of stuff, including links to the bios of our panelists, including information about Streaming Media NYC, which is coming to New York this May at the Intercontinental Hotel, May 20th through the 22nd. I am hosting and curating along with Steve Kelly. We've got a great 3 days jam-packed of content and panels and actual debates with debate club rules, keynotes and conversations about really cool stuff, including everything that we're talking about during this conference and this panel that's coming up right now. Steve will give you not only a link, but a discount code for price off on passes. And take a look at the agenda. If there's a panel that you think you might be a good fit for, we're still filling a couple of seats on a couple of panels. So reach out to Steve or myself. I believe, yeah, that is it. Because we were giving away a camera, but that's no longer eligible because if you weren't here for 2 panels, you missed it. So I think that's it. Now I'm going to open up our panel, Successful Strategies for Growing and Monetizing Your Streaming Service. I'm going to bring to our table here, Chris Pfaff, the one and only Chris Pfaff.
Hello, Evan.
Of Chris Pfaff Tech Media. How are you, sir?
I'm well. Great to see you as always.
Couldn't pick anybody better to host the last panel. So
hey, we're going out with a bang. It's the grand finale of Streaming Media Connect, February 2024, and we're feeling great. And we do look forward so much to Streaming Media NYC back in New York.
In New York. All right. Well, good luck with the panel.
Thanks. Thank you, Evan. Thanks, Steve. Thanks to everybody for being here. We're going to have a great conversation, and not just because we have amazing panelists, but yes, that is a key component. First, let me bring on Rene Santaella. He's the Chief Digital and Streaming Officer of Estrella Media. Welcome, Rene. He joins us from Los Angeles today. Next, we have Matt Farina, the SVP of Content Distribution at NBCUniversal. He joins us from New York. Welcome, Matt. And we also are very lucky to have Eric Sorensen. He's the Director of Streaming Video Research from Parks Associates. He joins us from Houston, Texas. Welcome, Eric. And yes, Sharma, she's the Head of Consumer Insights for Publishers Clearinghouse. She joins us, yes, from Rovaniemi, Finland, way up there in the Arctic Circle, where the reindeer and the Joulupukki, or Santa Claus, live. So welcome, Huva Paiva to you, Smriti. Last but not least, we have Julia Moonves, SVP of Advertising Sales and Brand Partnerships with pocket.watch. She joins us from LA. Welcome, Julia. It's great to see you here. Great to have everyone. I'm going to kick off this conversation with a question for you because I think it embodies a lot of the things that we want to talk about and get sort of your opinion. Big news in the last really 48 hours, Walmart buying Vizio. Freevee is being rolled into Prime by Amazon. These are 2 big companies now, Walmart, Vizio, and Amazon, that are going at it, and retail is part of this. I'm going to start with you, Rene. What's your take on this in terms of what we all want to discuss here about growing and monetizing services? What does this mean for the whole ecosystem, and also from where you sit at Estrella Media?
Yeah. Well, look, I think the Walmart acquisition of Vizio is a positive news development in the AVOD fast space. There's certainly a lot of strain on the business models in media and entertainment, and that includes AVOD and fast. And so to see Walmart's interest in the value that AVOD and fast brings through this Vizio acquisition is positive, because they see the value of this business being a part of their overall ecosystem with a number of services, and that is a good thing. I think that's good for the industry, and it shows how AVOD and FAST can play along with other services.
It would seem to really elevate it, frankly, because we're now, you know, and I want to speak specifically to Walmart Vizio. We're now in a situation where you don't have to imagine too hard what this means in terms of e-commerce and new levels of shoppable content, interactive content. Matt, you're in a big role there at NBCUniversal. What does this mean for you, both you know, from a distance and also kind of closer to home? What's your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, Vizio is certainly one of our great partners, and you know, we're really interested in working with them as they get integrated within Walmart. You know, sounds like a great opportunity for both them and for Vizio. And for us, like if you think about, you know, our charge as a programming company, you know, we're really focused on scale and distribution, and obviously we're excited to see what this sort of means for the ecosystem and for all programmers as they continue to sort of grow that platform. So it's exciting.
Yeah, that sounds great. And Smriti, you know, I'm interested in your take on this because, of course, you're looking, you've got a lot of panels that deal with this. What do you think?
I think I agree with what Rene said, that it's a good merge of VAST and AVOD, and also for the fact it has, I mean, in last few years, it has become a data game for everybody. Whoever wants to do monetization has to acquire some kind of data so that they can do measurements, they can do advertising. So it's all merging together. We have seen in past that, you know, bundling services together, which Amazon has or Netflix has created a good, you know, a good interest reducing churn, and acquiring the data part of it has actually made it even better. So I think it's definitely a positive move from Walmart into this run.
Yeah, and again, since you mentioned Amazon, of course, it's well known within our circle, certainly in the industry, but sometimes you need to repeat it that Amazon advertising has become a bigger player in the last 5 years. Eric, your take on this, and interesting again because Parks Associates has looked at the device side historically, but so what's your take on Walmart Vizio?
Yeah, I mean, I think Walmart is thinking broadly about how it competes and influences across the consumer's life, right? So thinking about this acquisition from the standpoint of, you know, Walmart is becoming an ad sales powerhouse through Walmart connected ad business and third-party marketplace on Walmart.com. So I think their CFO has publicly come out and said, look, we're looking to move away from brick and mortar and more distribute its revenue across different services, right? So this is a great opportunity for them to think about the ad opportunities within Vizio. And I mean, one of our data points says that, you know, Watch Free Plus has over 300 channels and viewing hours have doubled in the past 12 months, right? So they're continuing to increase. As Matt had said, they're a great partner with a lot of the content providers, and they're continuing to increase the options for the consumer.
Yeah, and that's an interesting point too, because of course, you know, I don't want to take too much time parsing sort of the Walmart history here, but for those who've been around, as we all have, we remember their investment in Voodoo, and you know, maybe just the timing wasn't right. And back to Smriti's point about data, I mean, here we are, we have richer insights, so now Walmart has first-party data. It's very interesting. And Julia, I mean, you're with a fascinating company. For those who don't know, Pocket.watch is one of the leaders in children's content, and particularly on the influencer side and even YouTube. What does this mean for you, just in terms of the way you look at this, but also even specifically, because I would think that your audience might want to dive into this more too, right?
Yeah. Pocket.watch, we're big believers in the value of audience. So Vizio being able to demonstrate how massive their audience is to Walmart and be able to get this sort of acquisition is major. And so it's very interesting. We work primarily with kids in terms of the contextual targeting world, but the data available now to Walmart through this acquisition in terms of what are people consuming, what ads are getting completed, what's converting, makes them a powerhouse in terms of being able to reach consumers and convert to purchase. So
Yeah,
very
yeah,
exciting.
it is exactly what I was thinking. So, really fascinating times and great for you. And we'll come back to you in a second. Matt, so yeah, and by the way, the Olympics are coming up, Matt. I would think that an NBC would want to, push more, maybe in Walmart and maybe more on Vizio and maybe even sell some sneakers. Who knows? But let's talk about what you have in front of your desk every day. I mean, you were there for the launch of Peacock, which is a very heavy lift. But that's SVOD and has AVOD tiers. But you've really joined the fast revolution, if you will, with a massive number of channels from SNL to the Kardashians, Top Shelf, etc. And the Real Housewives involves. Is that really just an obvious way to monetize your library, particularly from channels you produce and own yourself? Give us your view of this, because I think it's fascinating, given just the breadth of what you have in
Yeah.
your libraries.
Yeah, I mean, I think what we've learned is that it's really still clear that consumers want professionally produced content, and our strategy is to make our content available to the widest audience as possible, right? So distributing our content far and wide is important to us, with a focus on driving scale. Julia talked about audience, reach. That's all very much important to us as a programmer. So of course our approach has evolved as consumer behavior has evolved, and we have all the pieces that we think are necessary to be successful and continue to compete, right? So we continue to invest in the pay TV business. That offers a very, very, very large audience, and those customers and those distributor partnerships are still really important and valuable to us. But there are audiences that are watching elsewhere and in different ways, right? So for those audiences who are different, we've got a couple of different things. We have Peacock that you mentioned. That's our direct to consumer service. That's got ads and it's got a premium layer that has no ads. And then we have Fast and AVOD. So all of those products, basically allow us to find new audiences, allow people to sample content, create new advertising revenue for us, obviously, and then create promotional opportunities for all of our brands around the company. And Fast and AVOD, to your point, Chris, like really offers a company like us a way to kind of meet consumers where they are on their own terms and expose them to all this great library content that we have, right? So this is a very sort of familiar format for them, right? For the consumer, they understand the lean back experience. It's linearly programmed, and I think a welcomed way to kind of watch TV without working too hard as a consumer. So for us, yeah, it's about really sort of the library that you mentioned, the different opportunities that we have out there to kind of really have these different consumer touch points.
Yeah, a great answer to that. So, sort of stay tuned here, because as things shift, you're very well positioned to move wherever those viewers go and however you might engage them. Speaking of engagement, Rene, you're in an interesting seat, because, of course, the Latin market in the U.S. is way over-indexed in digital media consumption for decades. And you've got some interesting things you've been doing in Fast. I mean, what do you see in terms of bringing brands into this world, and how does that impact how you want to grow audiences with this AVOD Fast world?
Yeah, so at Estrella, we take our TV experience and we bring that to Fast. We don't see Fast as like a video playlist, which I think it has a kind of a reputation from its origins of just being kind of a one-trick pony. We see it as TV, and we program it like that. We take our best studio content and we make it available everywhere. We work very hard with our partners. They're a big part of our success, building strong relationships with our distribution partners and having multiple communications with them, and making sure that they always know what new content we have and what we're up to, I think is really important. From a streaming standpoint, beyond Fast, we're in AVOD, and when we look at AVOD, it's working with major AVOD players through licensing. It could be our own app. It could be a hybrid with Fast and AVOD within our own app or other partners. So there's lots of different areas there. We have a big YouTube strategy, and frankly, if you don't have a YouTube strategy, then you're not in the connected TV streaming space. That's the truth. Whether you're a publisher or even an advertiser. And so I think that's an important part of our business. We have an audio streaming business where we've taken our radio and we've expanded our footprint tremendously when the terrestrial signals don't reach everywhere in, like, Los Angeles, for example. It's amazing what a smartphone can do to audio streaming business. And so we've taken this similar approach to NBCUniversal and Peacock, where we believe in premium content, we believe in distributing it everywhere, and we've taken that approach. And it's been very well received with the U.S. Hispanic marketplace.
Yeah, I want to come back to you on the audio side of things in a minute, but thank you for saying, because that's a great pull quote for those who just walked away. Listen to what he said about your YouTube strategy, because you're not in connected TV if you're not in YouTube. Thank you for saying that. And speaking of YouTube, Julia, Ryan's Toys, you've got some big hits on YouTube. You continue to really just amaze. And as Evan Shapiro said when we were prepping, anyone under 10, everyone under 10, I should say, knows who Pocket Watch is. And I would say, of course, because their parents do as well. But what, you're in this interesting dynamic here, and particularly with YouTube. Talk about how you address audiences and grow, and also, yes, absolutely, some of the brand strategies as well in terms of monetization.
So yeah, we found that everyone knows that YouTube's the #1 platform for kids, for Gen Alpha, in terms of streaming and where they want to consume. But we found that this is due to a lack of the major kids and family publishers and broadcasters are sort of not meeting the demand of this audience, which is, we want to see ourselves represented in content. We want to see families that look like ours and play patterns that look like ours. And we don't see that when we watch, animal families, animated animal families on content. So what we've created is a way to repackage the best of the best from YouTube with our partners and distribute those across our FAST channels. We have an SVOD, we have different AVOD apps, and we found audience migrates to it. Wherever we kind of put our creators, audience finds them and engages with them. So that's the model we've been going after.
No, there's nothing more addictive than a kid with his content or her content.
Right.
Believe me, and I remember back in my days. So I want this to talk to our analysts. For those who don't know, that would be Eric and Smriti here. So which streamers do you think have benefited the most from what I'm going to call the current sort of fast AVOD trend? Smriti, let's start with you. And by the way, for those who just joined us, Smriti is not giving out $1 million checks. Okay, that's not part of her remit. I know you're watching because you think she's going to give out money at the end. She's not, but she's going to give you insights, which could be billions of dollars. So with that note, go.
Thanks, Chris. We did research last year, and we found out that the big part of subscriber or user base in streaming are now our serial churners. Basically, 93% of the people who were subscribed to streaming services were open to move or shift between the streaming services. In paid, they subscribe, binge, and churn. In free, they dabble, test, and leave, right? Netflix has been able to avoid this so far. Their churn is super low, like -2 or lower. Their kids programming is a part of it, their library is another. However, in my opinion, in the sea of churns, the streamers who have benefited the most has been definitely Amazon. They practically have no churn because Prime is far more than just a subscription video, right? Now they've added live sports also in this very sticky mix of platforms between, and it has the biggest ad tier than Netflix. All these research just shows that video alone is not enough to truly prevent churn. It certainly demonstrates the power of utility. So adding and bundling things together has been able to prevent Amazon from literally having no churn.
Wow. Yeah, that's a great analysis. And Eric, what's your take on that, in the state of things? Let's just say, look at the last really 3 years. Or even 2 years in terms of fast AVOD.
Yeah, I think the services that are benefiting probably the most from fast and AVOD are the media conglomerates, right? So when you think about, our research finds that 41% of consumers have used an AVOD or fast service in the last 30 days, right? So, and that's up 10% just from last quarter. So the real winners in the fast and AVOD space are the media conglomerates of Tubi and Pluto TV and Freevies of the world with Amazon. which, by the way, those are the three most adopted services in the AVOD space. So the advertising and the cross promotion opportunities for these media conglomerates SVOD service within those FAST and AVOD platforms is extremely valuable to Paramount and to Fox and to Amazon. So I think the last thing that I would say on that is that, as households work to trim unnecessary expenses, we expect that the continued rise of AVOD and FAST, but also that is bolstering the SVOD services that are attached to these media conglomerates.
Yeah, it's an interesting point that you make. Of course, there's a rumor last week about discussions, and Matt can plug his ears here. No, just kidding. About Peacock and Paramount Plus merging. Yeah. But part of that was also really coming out of Paramount's numbers recently. And sure. One of the things I saw, without diving too deep, TLDR, was that Pluto had many more viewers than Paramount Plus. Now, some of us might say, well, of course, and others might say, what, really? So it is an interesting mix. I think maybe we just haven't seen where things go with this, or how things get bundled. But interesting that you'd say that, because I think it's really, I don't know. I mean, for me, Walmart Vizio sort of points in new directions. Maybe there are people who are going to scrap things for something else, but still to be determined. I want to talk about this everywhere concept that, particularly in FAST, has been a thing. And Rene, you pointed to it a little bit, and maybe Matt, you alluded to it. But is that that's sort of been the distribution model of that being a good strategy? You have to be everywhere. But are there specific platforms or outlets that you think have enabled richer monetization? What do you think, Rene?
Yeah, so first of all, yeah, everywhere is good. Uniques, getting as many uniques as possible in an ad business model is a good thing. So especially when there's buying and selling and delivery happening in milliseconds, programmatically, and obviously guaranteed buyers, they want to know their reach, right? So that's a good thing, and an everywhere approach helps accomplish that. I think that the other question you asked, I think there's an opportunity where certain partners where you can be more successful with monetization with those uniques, because the relationship is stronger, the data transparency and the ability to use technology to drive the monetization versus business development contracts with rights that don't map to optimization. I think those opportunities are what makes certain partners more valuable than others.
Yeah. And Matt, do you find that that's the case as well? I mean, I'm curious because you have so many touch points.
Yeah, it's funny. My response is very similar to Rene's. Obviously for us, it's very important that the full breadth and depth of our portfolio is available on all the places where consumers are, because this is an ad-supported business, and audience and scale really critical for us. But to Rene's point, the partnership is the thing that's really interesting, right? Working with partners, optimizing our channels, figuring out what's working, what's not working. Each platform and partner offers something unique and different, right? So we want to work with them and want to understand what's happening on their platforms, and want to understand how we can make that better for them, right? And I think one of the pieces about FAST that's really interesting, and I think some partners are doing a better job, and a lot more people are paying attention to it, but like the idea of search and discovery has probably been never more important in an aggregated environment where there's so much content and so much stuff just pulling for our attention. Really focusing on metadata and transparency of data generally, Rene, is important, right? So that we're able to kind of have the content show up to the right consumer at the right time and ultimately make it the best experience possible.
Yeah. But believe it or not, oh, sorry, I was just going to say, believe it or not, there's no industry standards on metadata in this space, if you can believe it.
I was just going to get to that, because the fact is that I was thinking of IAB in this, and discussion like where do we pull the strings? I mean, anyone who thinks that this is not the Wild West and I say that in a good thing, not the idea of being 12th century medieval, horrific, but Wild West in terms of Yahoo. There's gold in them there are hills. I'm mixing some metaphors here, but I think that that's kind of where we are. And I want to get to Julian in a second here, but I do want to park a question for everyone here, which is the relevance of metadata in the battle for ROI and how it affects addressability and personalization. So think on that for a second. Julia, getting back to this everywhere, what does it mean for you? Because you're very YouTube specific and focused. So talk about how you deal with the distribution landscape and yeah, how you work with partners to optimize.
Yeah, we definitely are big believers in being everywhere that you can be in terms of wherever the audience is, be there and be available for them. We think a lot about distribution and exclusivity windows and all of that as we're building. We have our Ryan and Friends SVOD service. We want to make sure there's value there for our consumers and that's not available for free on other platforms. But big believers in being available everywhere the consumer might be interested in consuming.
Yeah.
Julie, I think you said something interesting there, which is it dependent on the audience, right? So thinking about where the crossover opportunities are dependent on the audience. So from our research, we find that the services that are making smart decisions about data and understanding the audience through their analytics are the ones who are winning sort of that distribution war of content everywhere or content targeted to the right audience.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I agree with that. I mean, again, a lot depends on content also. Like, just a simple example. I mean, Suits was one of the biggest playing, show, and it played what 9 season in Netflix, and then last season they moved to Amazon. How many people subscribed into that just for seeing the last season? I mean, we just had Super Bowl on Paramount Plus. How many people just subscribed just to watch the Super Bowl? I mean, again, content takes a big role as to who is watching and where the subscription will be going. But again, I think bundling the best services to acquire a certain market of your audience will be the future. I mean, you'll have to focus on one kind of audience. Not everything will be available for all.
Yeah, and I think that's particularly true globally because, of course, Paramount Plus is global now. And by the way, I watched the Super Bowl 7 years ago in Helsinki, and you can imagine how late that was because it went into overtime, and I had to catch the first ferry to Tallinn in the morning, so not a lot of sleep. But now, yes, these big events can be streamed globally. You can get great partners. To Julia's point, you have exclusive windows, and Matt was kind of pushing to that point too, which I want to get into, going back to that metadata ROI question, which is really the idea of being able to use, alluding to what Rene says about, just your transparency in milliseconds to be able to create campaigns that might be pop-up cams, things you couldn't do 5 or 10 years ago. I think in FAST and AVOD, this is a remarkable opportunity. What do you think about that, Smriti?
I agree. I mean, again, data is the key for addressing most of the issue the media ecosystem is facing. And that's why this run for acquiring more and more data so that their analytics team can define what content and what data matches to it is the run at this point of time. I mean, that's the biggest competition. So the more these companies acquire data in a privacy first manner will be, will dictate the upscale and the downscales, and it'll be very close.
Yeah. I mean, it's an interesting situation. I would also foresee more tools coming out. And yes, I'm going to go to AI now, but just briefly, Matt, of course, you have a company that has a lot of technology that owns you, Comcast. So you see a lot of AI come through your door or have over the years. Does this matter today to you that much, or are you looking at opportunities? Or you even thinking about them? You can protect any real conversations you're having, but I'm just curious what this all means, from the monetization standpoint.
Yeah, I mean, you certainly can't ignore what's happening in the technology space. So, I think we're committed to using it in like a responsible way because it's really important that we get this right. And as a media company, we have to get it right. But we want to experiment like we have in the past with new technologies, but we have to sort of balance that with the human creativity connection component, right? So I think as the tech evolves, we'll continue to kind of watch it closely and see if there are pockets or use cases where it makes sense for deployment. I mean, certainly you can think of things like workflow optimization on the back end, right? Just getting content from point A to point B. Like there's a lot of use cases for it behind the scenes, even that are really interesting to us.
Yeah, and I mean, even in the last year, I've seen some young companies that are pushing more into the workflow side and not just recognition. And it's interesting because eMarketer had forecast that CTV advertising would surpass 30 billion this year, but the fast world has not yet yielded CPMs that really satisfy. Do you see that changing, Rene, anytime soon?
I do. I think there's two aspects to that. I mean, one is the perception of fast within the overall ad industry. I think it's definitely much more positive now than it was 2 years ago. And because more and more publishers and distributors are treating it like television. And I think so the quality of fast, the content that's available is there's been more scrutiny on bringing better content and delivering it in a TV experience, and I think that's good and that's positive, and I think advertisers are recognizing that, and I think that's going to continue to grow. I think the second piece is around we talked about it, the data and the measurement, right? And I think part of the issue around here is that there's walled gardens when there shouldn't be in this industry. And it's funny because there's a few there's a few players, big players, and I have to say this without naming names, but there's a few big players that have a lot of influence over the entire digital industry, the ad industry. And pretty much everyone else is in one large ecosystem, and it's kind of pointless to create walled gardens compared to these few big players. And so there's this approach where if metadata was shared properly, depending on who's doing the CDN or their server-side ad insertion, there were standards around it that people were promoting your channels through their ads TXT on their website to make sure that programmatic buyers can get the signals, that there was just overall kind of conformity when it came to data transparency and measurement for the buy side, the sell side. I think we would see much better CPMs. And we're starting to do at Estrella, we're already doing addressable targeting using some really good ad technology, but we can go much farther. There's better opportunities around contextual targeting. There's better opportunities around day part and prime, and there's so many things that we could do. But when you have so many different endpoints, it makes it much more difficult because there's different contracts involved and different rights and inventory shares and buyback and backfill and all this other complexities in the industry. And we're just making it way harder than it should be as an overall industry. And we should really just smooth this out and everyone will benefit.
Yeah, and I think that gets back a little bit to what we were talking about, the lack of standardization. But part of the walled garden issue, of course, is that we're dealing with legacy behaviors here. And the industry and the audiences are, they're going places, and they're not going to put up with this. Eric, I'm curious if your research kind of bears out, some of the things that Rene was talking about, and give us some other sort of input on this.
Yeah, I mean, I like Rene's strategy to think about the fast channels and original content, right? Because historically, the fast channels have had a low barrier of entry. The content's already in the cloud, just waiting to be served up to somebody. And we're hearing from our clients that, we have to figure out how to start differentiating our fast service in order to be competitive. So I think the idea here is that, we're past the stage of 24 hours of the Andy Griffith show. How do we get more content involved in that's original and unique and is going to drive engagement? So I also wanted to go back a little bit to the standardization of data. I mean, everybody is absolutely correct that Netflix supplies one set of data, Roku supplies a different set of data, and our clients are constantly saying to us, how do we get this standardized? What's the option to standardize the data metrics across the board? And to Renee's point, it will have a tremendous impact across the entire ecosystem of streaming services. If we're all using the same metrics, we're all using the same data points, right? So I think there's
And
some
it's
key players
available.
that are working on that. Yeah,
It's
go ahead.
available, Eric.
What's that?
And
It's
it's
available no matter who's controlling the
Right,
streaming and ad insertion, right?
right, exactly. Right, yeah, and who they're sharing it with.
Yeah, it's available, but the question is whether we'll be joining hands to use it together or
Right.
not. That's the big question.
I think you might see that given and I don't want to say necessarily coercion, but you know, whatever good deal making. And I think people will still have wrappers. I shouldn't say people, companies will still have wrappers the same way they do for standards-based technologies. You know, I mean, this is true with every camera manufacturer. So but I think that Renee's point is clear there too, particularly for programmers as well, because one of the things that I always look at is this idea that if you assume that ad frequency and ad fatigue and poor demographic data are drivers or two of the drivers of churn, what about too much or too little quality content? And where does that impact ROI? And I'll throw that to you, Matt, since you got a lot of quality content. So,
Yeah, I mean, for us, you know, I think you can't underscore how important the content is, right? Like NBCUniversal, we have a great library to your point, Chris, whether it's The Office or Parks and Rec or a really, really deep NBCU film library, whether it's library or even contemporary films that are coming out. We have originals. No question that streaming has become a big player for sports. You know, we talked a little bit about sports and how important it is and how important it is to our strategy. You know, last month we had the AFC wildcard game that was exclusive to Peacock, set all sorts of records in terms of being the most streamed live event in US history. You know, we have great partnerships with distributors. We're available on all these platforms. We're harnessing the power of our partnership with those partners. And then we've got a great consumer product, easy to use, great ad experience, great search and discovery features. Like all of those things I think will benefit you know, churn effectively.
yeah. Yeah, and it'd be interesting to see, you know, how that plays out, because I think that one of the things that I was really thinking of in asking the question about being everywhere, quote unquote, is that we're still in the business of television. We still have to create hits. We're still a hit-driven business. I don't care, you know, if we're talking about even some pod in interactive shopping that Walmart and Vizio create. It's still a hit. You're a hit on TikTok. You're a hit as a Twitcher, whatever. But that leads me, Rene, to talk about something I wanted to get to earlier with you, is that, you know, your audience is very mobile centric. I mean, the Latino audience is so it really drives a lot. Do you find yourself you know, marketing via mobile as well? I mean, where's the cross device strategy there? And I would want all of you to talk about that as well. But let's start with you, Rene.
Yeah. I mean, absolutely. Yeah. We do all sorts of marketing on mobile. We leverage our traditional linear television, OTA, as well as terrestrial radio as well. And we, you know, like, for example, we have a very popular morning show, Don Cheto Ore. It's #1 in LA, regardless of language. It's phenomenal. It's also nationally syndicated. It's also covered on our radio stations in Houston, Dallas. So that's a perfect example where we use terrestrial to, if you missed the show, you can always go and listen to the show on the Estrella TV app. And as an example, where we're kind of doing cross promotion. And then, you know, I think in the AVOD space, you have to be very selective about, you know, you have to be the economics of AVOD and FAST. You have to try to be very disciplined with acquisition marketing. So there's certain platforms that perform better, right? And so we do some activity there. And then, you know, we have a radio concert business too. And so We actively promote music festivals and concerts in across the country. Certain cities more than others, you know, LA, Houston, Dallas, Chicago, San Jose, you know, certain locations. And mobile is a big part of that experience. And so yes, to answer your question initially.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and I would think, Julia, that you would have a very interesting time that way as well. I mean, you know, you have a very young audience on one hand. On the other hand, that's a family audience too. I mean, what you know, talk about sort of the device strategy, if you will.
Yeah, our distribution strategy is largely CTV, but the device strategy, we're used to half of our content being consumed on iPads and iPhones. That's just how kids are going to consume content. But their ability to drive subscription and business renewal is insane. Like if your kid, anybody on this call that has kids knows that if your kid likes watching something on a certain service, you're keeping that service. So that's our strategy. But yeah, device wise, we're very used to a majority being on tablets and devices as well as mobile phones and things like that.
Yeah, and I just before we move on to some other discussion points, I find it funny that today you know, I have two phones. One is an iPhone on AT&T, the other is a S24 Ultra on Verizon, and one of the reasons is because AT&T crashed today. Don't know why, but anyway. But the point is that there was a time not too many years ago when if we had the same panel, we'd be talking about carrier bundles. Have those moved away? And I want to throw this to the analysts here. I saw a smile from Smriti, so why don't you take that first?
Well, I don't think the bundling has moved away, but just I wanted to go back to the previous point before this was it's funny to hear everybody saying that mobile web, there is a lot of content being played on mobile web, but on the other side, from an ad business perspective, CPMs are the lowest on mobile web. So isn't that in contrary with, you know, people are watching more things on mobile web, however, the CPMs from an ad side of views do not perform that well on mobile web compared to other, you know, it's a question. Again, it just came to my mind and it was funny to think about it from that perspective. So it's weird that it's working against of people watching on mobile web. So
Yeah, Eric, what's your take on that?
Yeah, just on the bundling piece. I mean, you know, the bundle still exists. I think they're shifting what the priority is to broadband versus TV services, right? We've seen Charter now offer ESPN and Disney as their TV service, right? So I think the bundle still exists. I think the traditional telcos are looking for ways to compete and continue to compete in this. You know, again, I think cord cutting is an old term now, but continue to compete as consumers are moving to streaming. So the bundle has just shifted in terms of what you're selling as part of the package and as part of the bundle, but they still exist. And certainly the partnership bundle exists, right? I mean, that's how, if you think about Apple TV Plus, that's how it launched. They gave it away for free for a year and a half before people started subscribing to it.
Yeah, and we haven't, thank you. We haven't mentioned Apple really until you just mentioned that, but of course, whatever is a loss leader for them. I you know, would strenuously object to anyone, won't mention a certain writer's name, who says that their content is not so great. Well, they've won an Oscar and some Emmys, etc. I think they've done okay. And for those who've been under a rock for the last 6 years or so, Amazon does own MGM, so major player in Hollywood. And if you've been to the Culver Studios, you know, they've got some nice hardware there in the lobby with a $120,000 walnut desk, by the way. So, you know, this is serious stuff, but I think that, you know, content still wins out here, but is very interesting in terms of the marketing side for all this in terms of growth, which is part of what we're trying to talk about. You know, I'm just curious, are there things that we've seen, particularly from Fast, that are really good learnings overall for the industry in general? And part of that question is also the global expansion. You know, I think immediately, of course, of Pluto, and I'm just curious there, of course, you know, owned by Paramount. You know, Smriti, what do you think about that in terms of global growth and on both sides?
I think again, there are a lot of metrics being still learned. Who is watching, how many shows they're watching, which channels they're watching, how long they're watching. I mean, measurement in fast is terrible, and advertisers are tired of that. So what data we do have shows that despite a large amount of sampling for a large part, vast viewership is fragmented and short. I mean, that's at least for now.
Yeah, Eric, do you concur with that?
Yeah, I mean, just thinking about the allure of the fast channel, right? It's the lean back experience. There's no sign up. You don't have to put into your username and password. But I think from an industry standpoint, it's conditioning the consumer a little bit who was signed up for their SVOD service. It's month to month. I can cancel it anytime. It's conditioning the consumer to be ad tolerant, right? And I think that we're moving to that position now. Clearly, I mean, every major service has now launched an ad tier or a paid ad tier, right? So I think that the customer's experience when they first signed up for an SVOD service of no ads and I can get out of it after a month, I think that is slowly moving to the wayside as the adoption of of fast channels continues to rise.
Yeah, I think that but don't you think that people have been pretty well conditioned by YouTube? And Julia wants you to weigh on this. That pre-roll, mid-roll, post-roll, that they're conditioned by that. That I've found something I wanted to see. Hallelujah! I'm going to watch the damn ads, or even just 5 seconds of them. Don't you think that that's good enough for most people if they're at a key point of something during a movie, for example, and suddenly they get an interruptive ad, and they're like, okay, fine, I found something I really wanted. Back to discovery, which I think, Matt really let off, and certainly Rene mentioned as well. Is that still a big problem overall? Do you think? And certainly that early on, even within the last, let's say 10 years ago, AI was looking to solve those problems for companies like Estrella. Well, all of you really. But do we feel it's less of a problem today? Anyone? I'll take you.
I just want to address, so we on fast for Estrella, we don't see poor engagement numbers at all. We see actually really healthy engagement numbers. I mean, we see people watch our news channel for really long periods of time, especially on weeknights. We see a lot of similar television viewing, where there's a lot of viewership during the prime hours. And what's interesting, this is what we learned about fast. It's kind of this weird hybrid world of television, linear television, AVOD, and syndicated TV. It's like people will come in and they don't have anything else, or maybe they cut their subscription for that month, or who knows what it is. But we have a regular audience that comes back and watches for periods of time every day of the week. When we promote a new show, a new season of something that they really like, we will see spikes of viewership and engagement. We will see people watch marathons on a Saturday afternoon or Sunday afternoon more if it's the right marathon for them. And live is really important in fast. Live drives engagement, and it gets people in and watching. And then you'll even see a difference of viewership behavior on fast channels on our own app versus some of our partners, because they've made the choice to download our app on a certain platform, and they just don't feel like figuring out what to watch, and they just enjoy the curated experience that we provide them, and it's effortless. And they watch for really long period of time. I mean, really big numbers on AVOD. And so it really varies. I think engagement in fast can be poor if you're not treating it like television.
There we go. But also something that has a specific super service to the fan. I think that's the other thing, particularly with live, particularly with niche sports, I think is an incredible opportunity, and music, of course. But before we go to questions, Rene, and I want to start with you and kind of go around. You mentioned, and for those who don't know the history of Estrella, please check it out, because it did start is over the air. But the audio side to me is very interesting for fast, because I think that podcasting is going to see a sort of a new spike through FAST. We saw that quite a bit in the last year. And I'm just curious, Rene, if you think that that's an opportunity in general, but also specifically for Estrella.
Yeah. So number one, we actually stream our Estrella news channel on TuneIn. But it's not optimized for audio. So there's room for improvement there. And I think it requires a different programming schedule. And certain shows play better in audio only than others. And so that's something that we're going to work on as we get more and more efficient with resources, right? The other opportunity is like, I'll use the Don't Shut the Audio show, and I'll use AI, right? There's an opportunity with generative AI to create video content based on parts of the morning show. And we're exploring that too. I think there's really interesting opportunities to go farther with audio and creating, animated South Park type video content that maybe they didn't catch the morning show, but they might enjoy it differently as a show in the evening on their connected TV device later on. So I think there's a lot of interesting places that we're going to go in the coming 18 months.
Wow. Yeah. Thank you for that answer. Anyone else want to talk about the podcasting opportunity in FAST CTV? Well, I certainly think there's a big opportunity. I think that because one of the things that's interesting is that of course, you've got a lot of video content out there. Most people are still listening to it. But I think that's just another way to grab audiences and migrate them. And before we go to questions, I just have one question for Julie. How old is Ryan now, by the way?
I believe he's 12 now.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So he's going to become a teenager next year. He'll probably look like a younger kid forever. But so wow, getting old.
Got two
Well, now
younger sisters though, so
okay, that's boy, why did I not know that? Okay. Hilarious. It's all in the family, right? Like the Kardashians, right, Matt? Yeah, there we go. Boy, we're getting Ryan and the Kardashians mixed up. That's dangerous. Speaking of generative AI, and by the way, that's brilliant, Rene. I look forward to that. We seem to have a lot of questions, but only from one. No, we have three people. Okay. Well, Clay Lambert is winning the Olympics in questions, so I'm going to pick one of his questions. Is FAST aiming to condition to consume ads? So boomers, Gen Xers, and Gen Y are already conditioned. Is this mainly addressing Gen Z and later? So it's really a demographic question. Is FAST more for Gen Z and later?
Since I brought it up, I can try to jump in here, which is, yeah, I mean, I would agree that the youngest of the generations are already conditioned. I think those consumers who had traditional cable, right, and now have made the transition to an SVOD service that didn't have ads need to be reconditioned. And that's the intent, I think, for some of the FAST channels or some of the FAST platforms to recondition the consumer that, what I said earlier was that experience that you had with no ads is slowly moving away. And those are the consumers that you're trying to recondition. Right.
That's great. Great answer. Ellen Marte, I would love to know overall where you all see a streamer/distributor's use of social video coming into play for building audiences, growth, ads, monetization, and what metrics from that avenue may be valuable in all that. The answer can be it does not play a big part, but would love to know. Anyone want to take that? Smriti?
Actually, I don't really have thoughts on that. Social will definitely add towards the data collection, no doubt about it. I don't know how they're going to plan to use it because, again, with all the privacy laws coming in, I think they'll have to intelligently think about it before using it and have to put the policies out before collecting it also. So it's a good medium. I don't know how deep they can go with the laws in place. So
interesting.
One of the data points that we track is for the platforms used for watching social or user generated content, right? And while TikTok and Instagram are certainly gaining ground, but YouTube, and we mentioned it at the top of this conversation, is clearly the leader followed by Facebook and Meta, for content watched or recorded that's not of your family and friends. So what's interesting is we hear from our clients that the smart TV needs to start incorporating social content better, right? The TV needs to get more social, where I can like and share video content and share that with my friends, or hey, I just watched this show, check it out. I don't want to have to go to my phone to do that. I want to be able to do that within the smart TV. And we're seeing that some of our clients are starting to implement that. For example, I think Vizio actually implemented a TikTok experience across the top of their menu screen, right? So I think it's getting there, but certainly the social experience is still a mobile experience, far more engaged and a better experience than anything that you could find on a smart TV right now.
Yeah, we're still there. But thank you for that. That's great, because I was going to mention Vizio. Beth Rosen asks, what do you see in the crystal ball as to how to reach and engage the Gen Alphas in the next 10 years, and how platforms, content, and advertisers will play into this? So the crystal ball question, if you will. Julia?
YouTube.
There you go. One word, 2 syllables. Sounds like Rube, but it's tube. Wow. Yeah. I'm telling you, people, there's no Google bashing here. We love us some YouTube. We really, really do. But it is interesting to me, that this idea, that the social side of this, because we did mention Twitch a little bit, not so much TikTok or Snap. But where the metas of the world come into this in terms of driving. I mean, once upon a time, if we had done this panel 10 years ago, 11 years ago, Twitter had a pretty robust a TV group in New York, Mike Park. They had Vine, super cool. And that ship has sailed, but I don't think that the way that could engage, whether it's second screen or however somebody might cast that with a Vizio or other TV, could be very interesting. Clay, I'll just throw one more to Clay here, because this is an interesting question about AI immersive translation, long tail to short tail thoughts. Not entirely sure what the question is, but I think the idea is, can we use that for localization perhaps, or something else? I think part of his question was the idea of having immersive translation, breathing new life into Andy Griffith in parts of the world that never experienced it. So imagine somebody in Namibia trying to understand what the hell maybe our Barry RFD is. But that may be more of a metaverse quote unquote question, but it's a good one, I think, and maybe a topic for another panel. But since we did kind of mention Andy Griffith, so I think we may leave all of us pondering on that one, Clay. I think you've stumped the band, as it were. I could tell you that I think essentially what you're looking at is something that's a more interactive layer. And this technology is coming. We're working with a company out of Berlin called MuseMe, some of the founders of SRT, who are building in that kind of object layer in video. So you could have better localization and better contextualization and interactivity that wouldn't be as intrusive. I think that's probably the next generation of that for me. But I do think that we're kind of on a tipping point here this week with the Walmart Vizio acquisition and some of the other things we talked about. And we're at the top of the hour. So I want to thank the panelists here: Rene Santaella from Estrella Media, Matt Farina, NBCUniversal, Eric Sorensen, Park Associates, Smriti Sharma, Publishers Clearinghouse, no check from her, Julia Moonves, Pocket Watch. I'm Chris Pfaff from Chris Pfaff Tech Media. Thank you all. This is the last panel, so we go out grand finale, and I'm going to toss it back to Evan Shapiro.
Thanks, Chris. Great job, panelists. Thanks, everybody, for being here. Really great crowd here for a Thursday afternoon. The winner of our song contest at the beginning is Django Reinhardt and Stephen Grappelli. No, sorry.
Stefan Grappelli.
Stefan Grappelli. I Saw Stars. And our winner is Ellen Marte. I pronounced everything incorrectly. I apologize for that. Thanks everybody for sticking around all week. If you missed any of the content this week, all of it will be up on Streaming Media Connect's YouTube page. Steve's going to drop it in the chat right now, so you can go to it, but you can also Google that shit. And then look for information on Streaming Media NYC that's coming this May 20th through the 22nd here in New York City. It's going to be really great content. Hope to see you there. Thanks again, panelists and friends. See you next year. See you in New York, actually.